So let's seamlessly segue from the meditation back to the text. Panchen Lozang in his commentary to his own root text writes, well, when you are in equipoise on ultimate reality, do dependently arisen phenomena appear as just nominal, as mere imputations? When you're resting there in meditation, in that space-like awareness, space-like meditative equipoise, the reply is expressed thusly. He goes right back to his own root text. Thus, within proper equipoise on ultimate reality, you are free from the extremes of conceptual elaborations of samsara and nirvana, such as existence, non-existence, and so forth. So the very notion of conventional reality, names, labels, conceptual categories, they're not there at all when you're simply resting there. You're resting free of the extremes of conceptual elaborations, which means all constructs, all conceptual categories, all names, all words, including the very distinction between samsara and nirvana. You're free. You've gotten some, as they say, give me some space. You got some space. The exalted Mila, as in Milarepa, says, in this regard, so here he is tapping right into the Kagyü Mahamudra tradition, the lineage. The exalted Mila says, where ultimate truth holds sway, there is no Buddhahood separate from obstructions. So there's no division, there's no distinction. Again, of names, categories, Buddhahood and samsara, Buddhahood and obstructions. There is no Buddhahood separate from obstructions. There is no meditator, no object of meditation. No stages to be traversed or signs of the path. There are no resultant Buddha bodies, as in Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Mandakaya, or gnosis, as in primordial consciousness. There are no categories at all, therefore there is no nirvana. Everything is merely imputed by names and words. That's for those people who are not in meditative equipoise. That's their problem. But you've transcended as you're resting there non-conceptually in meditative equipoise. You're not conceptually imputing anything. The three worlds, animate and inanimate, three worlds are form, formless, or desire, form, and formless realms. Or, alternatively, the worlds below, the worlds on the surface of the earth and above. So there's nagas below, for example, there are fish below, there are all of us land creatures, and then there are those in the sky. The three worlds, animate and inanimate, from the beginning do not exist, so there is no arising. So this will be reminiscent of the Heart Sutra. And that is relative to emptiness, there is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no liberation, no path, and so forth. There's no attainment, no non-attainment. So he goes on, and well, he's making the same point. From the beginning, these three worlds do not exist, so there's no arising, there is no basis, there is no connate, as in connate mental afflictions and so forth. There is no action or ripening of action. Therefore, not even the name of samsara exists. The final reality appears like that. That's where you rest. It is said that the perfection of wisdom cannot be expressed by speech or thought. And it's by its very nature is ineffable and inconceivable. It's not that you're not articulate enough. And even if you're speaking with someone, even if you have achieved the perfection of wisdom, gain such profound insight, and you're speaking with someone else with profound insight, speaking out of your intellect to another person's intellect, you still can't do it. Okay. That is, it just by very nature transcends all conceptual elaborations, whether in the mind or articulated through speech. And as the scholar adept, the Pandit Siddha Kyungbos teaches, worldly appearances are self-releasing, like illusions or dreams. They're gone. They simply have no footing when you're resting in meditative equipoise. Well, if that is so now he's just kind of focused in, that's what it's like, insofar as words can point to that which is inexpressible. What about then the rest of reality, that is the world where, the world we're living in? Well, if that is so, are actions and their results and so forth utterly non-existent, since they have no footing, they have no place when you're resting simply in the emptiness of the mind? Does that mean then that they don't exist at all? They're utterly non-existent. It is said that although they do not exist ultimately, which means they do not exist really or inherently. Their non-existence is not utterly settled. That is, don't just settle there, don't think, now I've got it. They don't exist at all, since action and its result and so forth very much exist. And then Roger Jackson quite helpfully put in conventionally, that is on a relative level. I'll pause there. There's a phrase today which is kind of leaping to mind today. Very, very important, and the phrase comes from my Gelugpa training. And that is, when you want to engage meaningfully with the world around you, with other sentient beings, if you want to meaningfully cultivate the four immeasurables, for example, or the four greats, or you'd like to provide some service, you just want to engage, maybe you'd like to, act on behalf of the environment, to preserve the environment, and so forth. If you wish to meaningfully engage with the world around you, including other sentient beings, of course, then the phrase that comes up is mata mache. Mata, don't investigate, don't analyze. What this means is, do not engage in ontological investigation. Because if I'm cultivating loving kindness for a person like Francesca, if I cultivate loving kindness, and then as I'm doing this, I said, well, why don't we really get it on? And I'll apply some ultimate analysis here. Okay, Francesca, I want to develop loving kindness for you, but by the way, are you your body? No. Are you your mind? No. Are you the combination of both? Are you either one? Do you exist separately? And then suddenly, I'm kind of looking into empty space. Where'd Francesca go? I was meditating on someone a moment ago, and now she's not there. She's merely has only nominal status. She's only conventionally existent. It's hard to develop anything really deeply from the heart from someone who has only a nominal existence. Right? Or, moreover, if you're focusing right into the emptiness, and that's the real point here, if you're really doing that ontological probe and you're going right into the nature of the individual and coming up with emptiness, you never feel empathy or loving kindness or compassion for emptiness. The sheer absence of inherent existence of anything, people or anybody else, not going to happen. So there's a point when you suspend ontological analysis, because that will always lead to the same place. It will always lead to emptiness. It's always going to lead to space like meditative equipoise, where there's no Francesca, no non-Francesca, no human beings and no non-human beings, no conceptual categories whatsoever. So there's no object of loving kindness when you're resting in space like meditative equipoise. But as he's making here so clear, and with very few words, this does not negate that it's a profound insight you're having and dwelling in while in space like meditative equipoise, does not negate the world around you, which is filled with causal patterns, actions, and their consequences, the laws of nature, physics, biology, chemistry, and so forth. And human suffering and mental afflictions and striving on the path and so forth and so on. It doesn't negate that. And so insofar as you want to engage with this phenomenal world, then do bring your intelligence to bear. Engage in phenomenological investigation. So if a person is behaving in a very unwholesome way, well, then examine what are the causes and conditions. What gave rise to this? And then understand it. And then also, as we attend to, as I highlighted quite at some length earlier, and I have to be brief, but when we're attending to, well, what is the object, where is that dimension of Francesca that anyone could see if they could see this deeply, that is lovable and always lovable, whatever mood she's in, whatever behavior she's conducting, that's always there, right? Without going to the emptiness of Francesca, because that's not lovable at all. It's a sheer absence, it's a simple negation, right? So on that conventional level, that relative level, which is not negated by the emptiness of Francesca, where is that? On the surface level, we have Francesca being very friendly, but maybe not always friendly. Very wholesome, but not always. Very appealing, but sometimes probably unappealing. If you're like me, I don't quite know, but it's like that. But not always manifesting lovable qualities. There are some people I imagine do. I'm not one of them. But if Francesca's like me, then not always lovable in terms of how we're appearing. What's always there? Well, that brightly shining mind. Luminous, pure, the source of her yearning that is relative level, that which keeps her moving, seeking, wanting to find happiness, wanting to be free of suffering, saturated by loving kindness. That's always lovable. If you could see it, if you could just have X-ray vision and see right through the veneers of the gender, the age, the ethnicity, the personal history, the degree of mental affliction she does or does not have. If you could just see through all of that, like with, yogic X-ray vision, then you'd see something that's just an ongoing stream of someone who's truly lovable. And that's the basis of designation. That brightly shining mind is not a person, but you say, I'm very happy to designate Francesca on that. Because then she's always lovable. And everybody is. Mao Zedong, Hitler, Mussolini, Donald Trump. Maybe I shouldn't quite have put them in the same kind of... Putin, me, all of us on that level, always equally lovable. The greatest villains of history, their brightly shining mind was still brightly shining. It was just heavily obscured. And for all of us, to varying extents, it gets obscured. But it doesn't go out. It says, not like dousing a lamp, remember? Not like that. Always there. So there we go. But that's on the conventional level. But it's a really good basis of designation. It's a valid basis of designation. It's also valid to say, Francesca's tall. Okay, but don't get a whole lot of mileage out of that, a whole lot of benefit. It's perfectly valid. She's tall. What's the basis of designation? Tall body. Okay. So there we are. Let's move on then. But ever so important to see that neither of these two truths negates the other, obscures, overwhelms the other. So he continues in his root text, yet when you arise from that state, rise from that space-like made of equipoise, and analyze, now you're investigating not how phenomena don't exist, but how do they exist. Right? Because he just said all of these very much exist. Actions and actions and their results and so forth. When you arise from that state and analyze simply due to nominal imputation, by the power of nominal or conceptual designation, dependently arisen events, including actions and agents, undeniably appear, naturally, like a dream or mirage, the moon in water, or an illusion. And it's very important to recognize all of those have causal efficacy. Dreams influence your brain, they influence your mood, your emotions, they influence your body. When you wake up, you can still have repercussions from the dream preceding, whether it was a magnificent lucid dream or whether it was a horrific nightmare. Dreams have causal efficacy. The people that appear in the dreams, those people that appear in the dreams and what they do to you, they have causal efficacy, right? And they don't exist. They're not there. They're empty appearances, but they can make you miserable. They can terrify you. Or you can have a vision of the Buddha giving you oral transmission, and bliss you out. Maybe even pointing out instructions. I knew one fellow who was in a dream, is actually quite good at lucid dreaming. And he was just having a non-lucid dream, and he bumped into someone, I can't remember who it was. And the person just looked at him and said, this is a dream? He became lucid. Yeah, cool. You should have people like that pop in your dream more often. So you might just bump into somebody who helps you become lucid. That person then had causal efficacy that tripped you over from non-lucidity to lucidity. Now that is something. That something really happened. That has a real impact. All right? So dreams have causal efficacy. Mirages, you can photograph them and so forth. And the moon and water, you can read a newspaper by it, if it's a full moon, and big print. And then illusions. Like I put on the website the notes for this retreat, a very cool link that Mary Kay sent me of this fellow, with the avatar and the holographic projections. If you saw it, it's quite cool. And those appearances, including having a conversation with a man from NASA, who's elsewhere, of course, and they're having a conversation going back and forth, and one is a holographic image, and the other is dreamlike. We call him a person, right? But one empty appearance having a conversation with another appearance, and they both influence each other. Very important. That holographic image wasn't really there, of course. And yet it's influencing things, and is influenced by the speaker. They had a conversation back and forth. So this is very cool. J. Miller, as in J. Milarepa, also states, so now he's coming back, having referred to the complete trans-conceptuality of resting in space like equipoise. Then he comes back to conventional reality. Emma, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, if there were no sentient beings, whence would come the Buddhas of the three times? Where would they come from? Since a result without a cause is impossible, in the realm of conventional truth, everything in samsara and nirvana exists. So said the sage. Existence, the appearance of entities, and non-existence, the ultimate reality that is emptiness, these two have natures that are inseparable and of a single taste. So ultimate reality, relative reality. So different, and yet of the same nature. They're not two entities slapped together. They're not two different domains, types of reality. But one can say they're rather the same reality. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. From this perspective, you see it as form. From this perspective, you see it as emptiness. So the distinction of our own awareness, he really cuts to the core. So the distinction of our own awareness and others' awareness does not exist. All is vast and unified. So suffering has no owner, virtuous has no owner, awareness has no owner. It suffices then to say that entities' way of existing, how do they exist? We know how they appear. They lie. They appear in a manner in which they don't exist. But entities' way of existing is to exist as merely nominal, merely imputed for the Supreme Arya Nagarjunapada, the Reverend, or the Venerable. There we go. Nagarjuna states, let me just drop something here. Everything well? Okay. Okay. States, as Nagarjuna states, because physical things are merely nominal, this is interesting, this has a big wallop. Because physical things are merely nominal, space also is merely nominal. So we tend to think of physical space as really out there, of course. How long does it take to send a rocket to the nearest possibly habitable planet? It's 40 light years away, right? Merely 40 light, but it's millions of years. It seems like that's a lot of real space out there. Real space. Yeah? And he's saying, well, no. Time is conceptually designated. With no conceptual designation, time is, frozen. Remember? Without introducing the subject, without introducing the observer, and I think there's a complete common ground between this particular interpretation of quantum mechanics, namely quantum cosmology, without introducing the observer with his clock. And the clock says now. You look at the clock and it says now. And relative to now you have past, and relative to now you have future, and now the universe from that perspective unfolds. Time is conceptually designated. No conceptual designation, no time. That's why when you're resting non-conceptually in emptiness, you're resting in a domain that is timeless. When you're resting in Rigpa, which means you're also resting in the realization of emptiness, it's in the fourth time. It's not in past, present, or future. It's not even in the present. It's in the fourth time. There's no conceptual designation, therefore there's no conceptual designation of time. And there is no time from that perspective, and there is no space. Thus, the final significance of the Mahamudra view, as described by the Arya father, Nagarjuna, and his spiritual son, Aryadeva, the final significance of the Mahamudra view, and he's fusing this entirely with the Madhyamaka, which is well said, was clearly explained by saying imputed existence, just nominal. That is, this whole phenomenal world, from a Higgs boson up to galactic clusters and so on, they do exist relative to the cognitive frame of reference in which they've been identified, and they exist as something merely conceptually imputed or designated. Their status is nominal. So I wonder if the Large Hadron Super Collider would still get its funding if everybody's persuaded that everything we're discovering exists only as names. No wonder there's such resistance to challenging metaphysical realism. There are enormous vested interests in maintaining that status quo. It's very profitable. For example, one must acknowledge, so here's just a simple point. For example, or as an analogy really, one must acknowledge that there are pillars inside a house with 4 pillars because it has 4 pillars. That's what we say. A house with a roof held up by 4 pillars, it has pillars because it has 4 pillars in the house. I mean, kind of like, come on, let's get real. Pillar, the term generically, is a universal. That is, pillar applies to every pillar. There's a skinny one, there's a pillar, but there's a fat one. There's a pillar. Some are made of stone, some are made of wood, some are made of clay. But pillar is universal. It applies to anything that is a pillar that corresponds to our conceptually agreed upon definition of pillar. It could be a pile of rocks. It could be a person. Hold up the roof, stand really tall. Don't move, because the roof's going to collapse if you move. I've just designated you as a pillar. Good. If you're performing the function of the pillar, then be a pillar. So pillar is a universal that pervades each of the four pillars. That is, it's applicable to each of them. What then is the definitional basis of the substance universal? This is techno talk, don't worry about it too much. Definitional basis, that is, what is being defined? What is the basis that you're defining of the substance universal, pillar? When you search, none of the four pillars is individually suitable as the definitional basis, that is, from its own side, in their basis of designation, you don't find pillar, nor are the four collectively its definitional basis. You can virtually read here basis of designation. So they are not the basis of designation, individually, not there, collectively not there, nor is its definitional basis a cause shown to be anything other than just the four individually and collectively. He's making the same points, but more, philosophically here. I'm just going to move through it. Thus, the substance universal pillar that is inside the pillars is a mere nominal designation, pillar on the four pillars. If you haven't gotten it yet, then just stop. If you search for something apart from what is sufficiently described as a mere nominal imputation, you're looking for the real pillar. It is not found, so all phenomena equally are to be described as imputed existence, just nominal. And as I was just reading this on my teleprompter, there came a very vivid memory of when I was receiving the autobiography of Geshe Rabten. And I'd hike up to his little cowshed up in the mountains. And he got, as he was coming to the conclusion of his life story, and he'd finished his training as a geshe, graduated with highest honors, and then went off and lived in this cowshed. And he was superbly trained in Madhyamaka, and an outstanding debater, really quite renowned. And so there he was, rather than debating or heading a monastery or doing any kind of stuff that would give him bigger reputation, he told me he'd be sitting in his cabin, and there was a pillar, just basically a tree stump, holding up the roof, for which the rafters were branches, and the roof was slate from the nearby slate mine just across the way, very much like this, a slate mine just across the way. But it was donkeys that would carry these big bags of clay. In any case, his roof, his very heavy roof, it's made of these heavy, beautiful gray slates, is all being held up with the rafters, and then the pillar. And he'd be sitting on his meditation cushion, attending to that pillar, and analyzing the pillar to see whether it was really there from its own side. Right? And he said, and I can almost quote him verbatim, it's there in the book, The Life and Teaching of Geshe Rabten, which is now out of print, but they came up with a new version, which I don't care for that much. But he said, as I was meditating on that, he said, well, I think I'll stop there. Because if I went on and told you what I've experienced, you'd think I'm completely crazy. And then he just dropped it. Now, I'm going to move through this one quickly as well, because we just don't need to get bogged down. Please don't agonize over this. There is a qualm. This is a qualm. This is a scholar's qualm. And if you're not a scholar, then you don't need this qualm. And if you are a scholar and you have a qualm, then it has to be clarified. But if you don't have a qualm, then it doesn't have to be clarified. So it's your choice. But if you have a qualm already, then he's going to help you. There is a qualm that must be clarified. Some earlier and later writers connected with Prasangika school say all cognitions of ordinary individuals are mistaken cognitions. That is, you're deluded all the time. And for that reason, any and all appearances that arise in the minds of ordinary individuals arise and appear as inherently existent. Okay, well, we've heard that before. Everything appears in a way it isn't. You apprehend them in a way they are not. Therefore, you're deluded. Everything at all time. The Svatantrika assertion, okay, there are two subschools of Madhyamaka, Prasangika, which is the widely regarded as the ultimate one, certainly the one that Panchen Lozang embraces as the deepest interpretation of the Madhyamaka view. And then there's the Svatantrika, the runner-up. The Svatantrika assertion that the object of negation is apprehended as having a truly existent way of appearing that is other than its present way of appearing. does not enable us to say that what appears in the minds of ordinary individuals like us does not exist as it appears. So it is erroneous. That should be just transparently clear, so I'm just going to move right on. And you can read that over and over again until it becomes clear if you need that. What he's going to clarify a little bit more. Thus, Svatantrika scholars who assert that form and so forth do exist by virtue of their appearance to an undamaged mind, that is, one that's not distorted, is not sick, you're not hallucinating, or what have you. So do assert that form and so forth do exist by virtue of their appearance to an undamaged mind, should think well about how Sri Chandrakirti, the great advocate of the Prasangika, refuted this assertion. Indeed, to the sense cognitions of commoners, remember non-Aryas, the 5 types of objects appear to be established self-sufficiently. Okay, we've heard that before. They appear to be existing from their own side, even though they are not established on their own. If you try to find them as they are on their own, you can't find them. Thus, those cognitions are mistaken. Fair enough. When one applies inferential authority to the point of view in which appearances of the 5 objects exist by way of their own characteristics, then it is valid to describe them as conventions. This must be understood. I could spend a lot of time on that, but I'm not sure it would be really worth the time. I think we can just move on because the whole text is so wonderfully empirical. But he is a great scholar, and he is very rightly assumes many of the people reading this text over the last 400 years are also very well-versed scholars. And this could clarify from some serious qualms for them. It's that scalpel identifying the difference in understanding of object of negation from the Prasangika perspective and the Svatantrika Madhyamaka. Okay? It's subtle. I think I could expound it somewhat. I'm just not going to now. The Geshes here could definitely do that superbly. I don't even know who they are, but any well-trained Geshe can nail that one. So, also many think that it is said that the truly existent person, not the person as such, so kind of like this conceptual construct, a truly existent person, not me, or not Michelle, or not Lim, the truly existent person. They concoct something they call the truly existent person. Not the person as such is negated. So while in equipoise they set aside. They set aside this whole person, the person they actually feel themselves to be, and try to negate a truly existent person created by the mind. So they create a straw man, and then refute the straw man, and they come out unscathed. Well, what was the point of that? Clever. This is completely unacceptable because it entails the extreme of permanence. You haven't really gotten out of the bog of substantialism, of metaphysical realism. You're still resting in an ordinary sense of I am, and then concocting a straw man and then defeating that with logic. Although there's much more to discuss, I fear to write too much, so that must suffice. Whew, we're out of that thicket. Again, Glenn, I think, could explain a lot of these things, probably better than I. I've just given him a big burden. Don't hassle him too much. So, showing the way to manifest the excellent path free of the extremes of eternalism, that's metaphysical realism, and nihilism, nothing exists at all, by meditating thusly. The root text says, when the empty is not obstructed by appearances, the emptiness of inherent nature is not overwhelmed or obstructed by appearances arising. And appearances are not terminated. They're not negated. I meant to say negated. And appearances are not negated by the empty. So just that, it's clear. Then you actualize the excellent path, where emptiness and dependent arising have a single meaning. In accord with this, the omniscient Je Tsongkhapa says, this very famous quote from him, as for the belief that undeceiving dependent appearances and the empty, or emptiness, are two separate things, it's very easy to reify both. As long as they appear individually, that is, when you're immersed in emptiness, you're totally out of touch with phenomena, and when you're really focusing phenomena, you're totally out of touch with emptiness, as if they're incompatible. As long as they appear sequentially or individually as something quite separate, the sage's meaning still will not be realized. You haven't got the point yet. When without alternation you simultaneously see, you simultaneously simply see dependently related events as non-deceptive, and destroy all manner of grasping at objects of determinate cognition, and that's what you destroy all reification, then your examination of the view will be complete. So, to rephrase that just a little bit, when your very insight into the very nature of phenomena as being dependent related events immediately points to their emptiness of inherent nature, and your insight into the emptiness of phenomena immediately points to their being, then their arising as dependent related events, now you've got the point. Because now you're seeing them non-dually, and seeing the same reality from two complementary perspectives. Then your examination of the view will be complete. Then you've got it. And it just occurred to me as I was reading it, my teleprompter just gave me another little cool little thing. Stillness and motion. Emptiness is by nature primordially still. It doesn't come and go, it's not arising and passing, it doesn't go anywhere. Emptiness by nature still, it's primordially still. Phenomena, form and so forth, always on the move, always changing. So simultaneously, resting in the awareness of the stillness of emptiness and seeing the movements as being nothing other than manifestations of, emerging from, emptiness. That just raised that whole issue of stillness and motion to a whole other level. Which is to say the middle way. That's the middle way view. Get that one and you're very close to Mahamudra. You're very close to Dzogchen. So, alas, it is dinner time. Enjoy your dinner. See you tomorrow. Thank you.